They made her stand up and explain why she was in first class, twice, while the man behind her, white and unbothered, walked through without a word. No one asked him to justify his presence. No one questioned his boarding group, his clothes, or his silence. But her? She was a black woman alone, and that was enough to trigger the system. No yelling, no scene, just quiet humiliation, served in stages, like protocol. What if I told you this wasn't a mistake? That every coincidence that followed wasn't just bad luck, but a plan? Because what happened next didn't just cost someone a seat, it cost $1 billion airline its future. And the person they tried to erase? She didn't protest. She didn't scream. She made one call. This is the beginning of a true reckoning, one built not on revenge, but strategy. So stay with us. Like this video if injustice hits you in the gut. Subscribe if you believe silence has never fixed anything. And tell us in the comments, which part would have made you speak up? And where in the world are you watching from? Because this time, the system picked the wrong name to erase. And you're about to see why. LaGuardia Airport hummed with the quiet precision of early morning operations. It was just past 6 a.m., and the fluorescent lights reflected softly on polished tile, casting elongated shadows of travelers dragging their sleek luggage through Terminal C. Most were dressed in muted business tones, clutching coffee cups or fiddling with phones, consumed with departure gates and emails queued for offline mode. At first glance, Layla Johnson blended in seamlessly. She was dressed in a high-collared slate gray blazer, minimalist in design but expertly tailored, matched with navy slacks and matte leather heels. Her black tote bore no logo, but every curve of its construction screamed exclusivity. Her pace was measured, not rushed. And her eyes? They scanned like a strategist surveying a battlefield. Layla was headed to Zurich, a trip scheduled weeks in advance, meticulously coordinated between her assistant, the airline's concierge team, and a logistics officer who only worked with 3 clients globally. Her boarding pass, stored both digitally and printed on a premium composite card, was marked to A, First Class, Haven Air International. This wasn't a vacation. It was a culmination, a move that would finalize a 2-year strategy merging one of her firms with a clean energy transport group based in Geneva. The deal? Worth $310 million. But here, on this quiet New York morning, that number meant nothing. Not to the gate agent behind the first-class check-in counter. Not to the woman with the frosted pink nails who scanned Layla once, then looked straight past her. Layla stepped forward, clearing her throat softly, offering her phone screen. "Good morning," she said, polite but assertive. "First class to Zurich." The agent's eyes didn't flicker. She didn't take the phone. Instead, she lifted a manicured hand and gestured left. "Economy check-in is that way," she said, not with anger, but something worse. Dismissal. Layla blinked once. No response came. She simply extended the physical boarding card this time, embossed with the premium foil stamp logo. "Actually, I believe this is my line." The agent took the card, her expression freezing for a second as the data synced. Then, without apology or acknowledgement, she handed it back and turned away. "One moment," she said flatly, tapping her headset. "Security? I have a verification discrepancy at kiosk 4. Layla stood still, her spine straight, her breath held not out of fear, but out of calculation. A white man in a powder blue jacket stepped up behind her. Before he could say a word, the agent smiled at him. "Morning. Zurich, right? Just scan here for me, Han." Layla didn't move. She watched the entire interaction unfold 2 feet away. Moments later, 2 security personnel arrived, not aggressive, but alert. One took Layla's boarding pass, re-scanned it, frowned, then whispered something into his walkie. "We'll need you to step aside for a moment, ma'am," he said. She didn't protest. She didn't ask why. She simply walked to the side, her heels clicking in perfect rhythm against the terminal floor. One of the security officers stood between her and the check-in desk now, subtly boxing her out. No passengers said anything. Some noticed. Most didn't care. And that was the point. This was no act of overt racism. No raised voice. No slur. It was policy, protocol, plausible deniability. It was the practiced choreography of subtle exclusion. And it was working perfectly. 15 minutes passed. Her credentials were verified. No apology followed. The agent didn't make eye contact as she said, "You're all set," then waved Layla toward the security lanes. The man in the powder blue jacket had already boarded. Layla's eyes narrowed, not from anger, but recognition. She'd seen this play before. The stage changed. The actors didn't. At TSA pre-check, her pass was rescanned. A green light flashed. But the agent stopped her anyway. "Random screening," he announced, gesturing toward the general boarding line. The woman behind her, a young brunette in yoga pants, breezed through without pause. Layla turned her head slightly, watching 3 other passengers pass. All white. None pulled aside. She was directed to remove her shoes, unzip her tote, remove her tablet, open a sealed folder. When she asked why, the officer shrugged. Systems acting up. One folder was labeled Horizon Equity, Internal Only. The officer flipped through it with bare hands. "You in finance or something?" he asked, smirking. Layla didn't respond. "Well," he added, still flipping, "seems heavy for someone going digital." She paused, then replied, "Some of us still deal in real assets." He chuckled like it was a joke. It wasn't. She reassembled her belongings herself and walked to the lounge elevator. The scanner blinked red. "Your access isn't active," said the receptionist. "I have the confirmation on file," Layla answered, showing the QR code and digital receipt. The woman scanned again. Red. Again. Red. "I'll override manually," she muttered, tapping into the terminal. On the third try, the screen flashed green. Inside the lounge, Layla didn't eat. She didn't check emails. She sat by the far window overlooking the tarmac. Her breathing was even, her eyes unblinking, her mind already cataloging each step, each look, each invisible fence placed before her this morning. People think power is noise. But Layla knew better. Real power is patient, quiet. It waits, sharpens, and then strikes with precision. Today wasn't the first time she'd been tested, but it would be the last time they tested her without learning exactly who they dismissed. Because Layla Johnson wasn't just a woman with money. She was a woman with leverage. And leverage doesn't shout. It moves silently until the ground beneath you shifts. The lounge was unusually quiet, with only the ambient sound of soft jazz filtering through hidden speakers and the occasional clink of porcelain as staff refreshed tables. Layla sat poised in the corner, the tablet in her lap still displaying the Zurich weather forecast. Cloudy with a chance of snow, but her eyes were fixed on nothing. Not the screen, not the window. She was thinking, calculating. The previous 30 minutes had been an exercise in grace under provocation, but the signs weren't fading. They were intensifying. At 7:02 a.m., she stood up and made her way toward the gate. Her flight, Haven Air 882 to Zurich, was scheduled to begin boarding in less than 20 minutes. She preferred boarding at the tail end of Priority Group 1, not because she enjoyed waiting, but because she disliked lingering on jet bridges or being observed by too many watchful eyes. At the boarding desk, the LED display flashed. Now boarding first class and elite members. Layla approached calmly, pulling out her physical boarding pass once again, just in case the app acted up again. She handed it to the young woman behind the counter, who scanned it, only to frown and scan again. Then again. "Is something wrong?" Layla asked. The attendant hesitated before replying. "It looks like your reservation has been reassigned. You're currently listed in economy, seat 32B. There was a pause in the air, like a sharp intake of breath before an argument. "Excuse me?" Layla asked, her voice flat but firm. This seat was confirmed and paid in full. First class. 2A. The attendant tapped her keyboard without looking up. "I understand, ma'am, but the system updated your seat 20 minutes ago. It may have been a schedule shift or an operational reallocation." Operational. Layla raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting I was moved from an $8,700 seat to a middle seat in economy. Randomly." It happens, the girl said, shrugging slightly. But if you'd like, I can check if there's a paid upgrade available for purchase. Paid upgrade? Layla echoed, her tone turning icier. You want me to repurchase the seat I already own? She reached into her tote and retrieved a printed invoice, placing it on the counter with deliberate control. The document clearly showed her name, flight number, and full first-class purchase confirmation. Paid via Nova Apex corporate account. The attendant skimmed it briefly, then offered a tight, nervous smile. Still might be worth checking with guest relations. There may have been an error on the back end. Layla leaned in slightly. There's no back-end error here, just front-end deflection. Another pause. The attendant blinked rapidly, then scribbled a number on a slip of receipt paper and slid it across the counter. You can call them directly if you prefer to speak with someone higher up. Layla didn't touch the slip. I'm standing right here. That's higher up enough. She stepped aside without waiting for approval, moving toward the small satellite counter tucked near the hallway that led to the tarmac doors. No one greeted her. The desk was staffed by a mid-level associate who looked up from her screen with vague annoyance. How can I help you? I'd like to understand why my seat was reclassified without notice, Layla said simply, and why your staff is implying I need to repurchase something I've already paid for. The woman typed her name, then nodded. Yes, I see here. 32B, I see that too, Layla responded. But I'm not asking what it says. I'm asking why it changed. Unfortunately, the agent said, eyes still on her screen, the manifest locks 30 minutes before departure. We can't manually override after that unless it's a medical emergency or security directive. Layla's gaze sharpened. Security. The woman flushed slightly. No, just in general. That's standard language. Layla folded her arms. Then find the override. Or find someone who can. The agent hesitated, then picked up her radio and whispered something into it. Layla watched as she lowered her voice, shielded her mouth, and then ended the transmission. A few seconds later, the woman looked up again, clearly rehearsing composure. You've been flagged as a reassignment due to ticket conflict. That can happen if two passengers are booked into the same seat. And which passenger was prioritized over me? Layla asked. The woman blinked. I don't have visibility into that. Of course not. Layla said nothing more. She turned and walked back toward the lounge corridor. Not because she expected resolution there, but because she needed a place to sit that wasn't laced with fluorescent hostility. As she passed the first-class lounge entrance again, she was intercepted by a different receptionist than earlier. This one scanned her boarding pass, then frowned. It says your ticket class no longer includes lounge access. It said otherwise 1 hour ago, Layla replied, and I've paid for services that are being erased. The woman didn't argue. She stepped aside and allowed Layla to enter. But the damage was done. Inside, Layla bypassed the buffet, the barista, the hot towels, and folded newspapers. She sat in the corner again, her back to the room, facing a mounted photo of the Swiss Alps hung beneath a recessed light. She reached into her bag and pulled out a compact, white envelope. Inside were 3 cards, one Nova Apex corporate executive card, one sovereign clearance access ID, and one slim contact chip embedded with a proprietary code. She tapped the chip against her phone and opened a protected folder labeled Failsafes. Layla didn't open any of the documents. Not yet. But her finger hovered over one labeled Stage 1 Trigger Event. Because this wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a random reassignment. It was a pattern. Coordinated, polite, but unmistakably precise. Her privileges were being stripped in real time, each denial framed as an error, each refusal coded in passive smiles. The downgrade wasn't just in seating. It was symbolic, a deliberate recalibration of who they thought she was, and who they wanted others to think she wasn't. They weren't just moving her seat. They were moving her status, dismantling her visibility, reshaping the narrative. She pulled up her email app and typed a draft to her assistant. Confirm. Were there any anomalies in the Haven Air confirmation this morning? Cross-reference original manifest and timestamp. She didn't send it yet. She watched the room. Outside the lounge glass, a few passengers walked past, laughing. A man in a tailored camel coat stood chatting with a uniformed officer. A staffer walked briskly with a clipboard. The world continued, without noticing the erasure in progress. Layla's phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Zurich board call 12 p.m. Central European Time. She didn't need the reminder. What she needed now was access. Or leverage. Or both. She stood and left the lounge. Her seat was now 32B. But Layla Johnson had never once played by the row numbers they assigned her. The loudspeakers crackled above gate C12 with a high-pitched beep, followed by a robotic female voice distorted slightly by age and volume. Passenger Lila Jansen, please approach the counter. Repeat, Lila Jansen, please come to gate C12 immediately. Layla didn't move. She knew the announcement was meant for her, but she wasn't Lila, and she wasn't going to play the game of pretending she hadn't been standing 10 feet from the counter for the past 15 minutes. She waited. The speaker buzzed again. Correction. Passenger Layla Jackson. Gate C12. Final call. Now she moved. Her name wasn't Lila or Jackson, but the third version was close enough to signal deliberate carelessness. She walked with measured calm to the gate, heels clicking on the polished floor, not rushing, not correcting the announcer. The agent behind the counter didn't look up as she approached. He simply handed her a newly printed boarding pass, still warm from the machine. No eye contact. No apology. Here you go, he said. She glanced down. Same seat, 32B. Her original 2A had vanished from the manifest like it had never existed. She tucked the paper into her coat pocket without a word and stepped back, eyes steady, spine straight. The boarding process began. Group 1 was called. Layla waited. Group 2. Then 3. Only when the cluster around the gate thinned did she finally move forward, passing the threshold into the jet bridge where warmth met recycled air and faint perfume from a nearby passenger. Inside the aircraft, the flight attendant, a woman in her early 30s with blonde hair pulled into a high, taut bun, greeted other passengers with bright, melodic tones. Welcome aboard. First class is to your left. May I take your coat? Right this way, sir. But when Layla reached her boarding pass in hand, she paused, squinted at the printout, then smiled too widely. Oh, you're in the main cabin. Right down the aisle, and then another 20 rows back. Layla gave a polite nod. Thanks. As she moved past, the attendant added, flying for work? Layla turned slightly, eyebrows raised. Excuse me. Just wondering if you're on a company trip. A lot of people flying out this week for conventions. No, Layla replied. This is personal business. The attendant nodded, but her eyes lingered, curious, judging, weighing. Layla found 32B, a center seat between a stocky man with headphones and a woman already asleep with her head tilted against the window. The overhead compartment was full. She asked for assistance from a passing crew member, who gestured vaguely and said, try 5 rows up. After squeezing her tote into a distant bin, she returned to her seat and sat down slowly. Her knees barely fit between the rows. She breathed deeply, controlled. The man beside her adjusted his armrest without asking. The woman on her other side snored softly. It was a far cry from the reclining leather cocoon of 2A. The plane taxied. The safety video played. Layla stared straight ahead. No one offered her a pre-flight drink. No hot towel. Not even eye contact. Just background noise and the dull ache of humiliation setting in, not because of where she sat, but because of what the downgrade represented. Control, subtle and strategic, wrapped in politeness and layered denial. When the drink cart reached their row, Layla pressed the call button, requesting still water and noting her medical dietary tag listed on her ticket. Actually, the flight attendant said after glancing at her tablet, your profile doesn't indicate a meal request. Layla pulled out her mobile and showed the pre-order confirmation. Gluten-free, dairy-free, low sodium. Registered 72 hours in advance. The attendant leaned in. That's typically reserved for our premium guests, she said. Sometimes the system carries things over incorrectly when tickets get reclassified. It wasn't a reclassification, Layla replied. It was a removal. Regardless, the woman said with a tight smile, "We'll do our best." She didn't. The snack passed to Layla 30 minutes later was a sealed foil packet of honey peanuts and a mini bottle of cola. She didn't eat either. Not because she was being stubborn, but because she couldn't. Autoimmune inflammation didn't care about flight class. Another attendant passed, and Layla requested a second bottle of water. "I'll have to check availability," came the response, though the cart was full. 5 minutes later, she asked again. "Still checking," she was told, as the same attendant handed 2 bottles to the passenger in the aisle seat 3 rows ahead, an older man in a fleece vest who hadn't requested anything. Throughout the flight, Layla remained composed. She adjusted her posture to avoid brushing against the other passengers. She closed her eyes briefly but never slept. Her mind cataloged, indexed, stored each interaction with timestamps and facial expressions. Every delay, every contradiction, every turn of tone. Midway through the journey, the cabin crew offered a second beverage service. A new attendant, younger than the others, stopped at her row. Layla took a chance and asked softly, "Is there any way I could have the herbal tea listed in my dietary preferences?" The young woman looked at her tablet and blinked. "This seat isn't authorized for that tier." "But it was when I booked it," Layla replied. "Yes," the attendant admitted, "but your current class doesn't carry over those selections." She gave a sympathetic shrug, but no solution. Later, when the first-class curtain was pulled back slightly during a staff transition, Layla glimpsed the espresso machine, the plated salmon, the glass dishes, the coordinated linen. She had paid for that experience. Not for vanity, not for luxury, for necessity, for health, for peace. And now she sat next to a man eating salted pretzels with his mouth open. Near the final hour of flight, a voice came over the PA. "MS. Layla Johnson, please press your call button." Heads turned. A few passengers glanced over. She didn't move immediately. A second call followed. "Passenger Johnson, we need to verify your meal preference." The tone was dry, flat, but unmistakably pointed. She pressed the button. An attendant arrived minutes later, tablet in hand. "We've had a discrepancy in your onboard meal code," she said. "I just wanted to confirm your requested restrictions." "I've already done that." "Twice," Layla said. "Yes, I see," the attendant murmured, her eyes skimming the tablet screen, then flicking up. "But it seems you're listed under 2 profiles. One with dietary tags and one without. Which one overrode the other?" "The latter," she said. "Of course," Layla replied. The attendant left without explanation. The lights dimmed. Passengers slept. Layla did not. At landing, as people stood and began gathering their things, the same blonde flight attendant who had greeted her at boarding passed by, then paused. "You're traveling solo?" "Yes," Layla replied. "Just curious," the woman said. "Not many solo travelers book first, unless it's a business account." Layla looked up. "You're right. So, are you traveling for someone else?" "No," Layla said. "I own the account." The attendant blinked, then gave a small nod and continued walking. Layla watched her go, then retrieved her bag from a distant overhead compartment, then stood in the aisle, waiting like everyone else. A woman behind her accidentally nudged her shoulder. She apologized. Layla nodded. Nothing else was said. The aircraft door opened. Light streamed in. Layla stepped off the plane. She didn't look back. The terminal was buzzing with arrivals and connections as Layla exited the aircraft, her expression calm but unreadable. She had no interest in baggage claim because, by design, she never checked bags. Everything important to her fit within a regulation-size carry-on and her personal tote. Efficiency, privacy, and risk mitigation. She didn't trust transit handlers with the weight of her operations, literally or metaphorically. She made her way toward the transfer corridor, planning to freshen up in the lounge before her Zurich connection. But just past the first digital signage panel, a uniformed Haven Air agent approached with brisk, practiced movements. "MS. Johnson?" he asked, voice clipped, tone dry. She paused, sensing the buildup. "Yes. We've had a baggage discrepancy. Your carry-on was redirected to checked luggage by our cabin crew for safety compliance." Layla's brow barely lifted. That's not possible. I boarded with it. It was in the overhead compartment the entire flight. No one touched it. The agent nodded, as if confirming her suspicion, but offering no resolution. Apparently, there was a concern about dimensions during boarding. The flight supervisor flagged it for hold transfer. It's already en route to the domestic claims carousel. Layla stared for a second, then spoke slowly. There was no mention of this at boarding. No tag, no form, no gate check authorization. Apologies, ma'am. These decisions are sometimes made in real time by the cabin team. You can retrieve your bag downstairs in claims. Layla narrowed her eyes, but didn't argue. Not yet. She turned and walked away, grip tightening on the strap of her shoulder bag. Something about the delivery of that message felt mechanical, rehearsed, as if the person delivering it had no part in its execution, just its presentation. At the claims desk, a clerk scanned her boarding pass and tapped into the system. I'm not seeing anything under this profile. Try again, Layla said. Haven Air Flight 882. Carry on, black leather, no tags. It was taken from me, without authorization. The clerk clicked again, then shrugged. We have no record of that item being received. If it was sent down without a scan, it may be sitting in holding, but there's no way to trace it without a tag. Layla blinked once. Her pulse didn't spike. Her voice didn't rise. That bag contained high-level proprietary documents, a secure device, and sensitive compliance files. I need it located. Immediately. Sorry, ma'am. If there's no record, it may have been misrouted or looped back to the gate. You'll have to wait for a manual sweep. She stood still for another second, then turned and walked toward security, not baggage. Her tote was still with her. Inside was her encrypted phone, her emergency access token, and a backup drive. But the bag they'd taken contained more than just tech. It held leverage. Specifically, documents related to a pending $300 million merger between Orion Airlines and a Middle Eastern aerospace conglomerate. One that, if mishandled, would cause stock volatility across 2 continents. Layla wasn't just a passenger today. She was a gatekeeper. And someone had just tried to lock her out of her own vault. She approached the main terminal security desk and requested assistance. As she spoke, she noticed 2 uniformed men glancing toward her, speaking into radios. She caught her name, mispronounced again, slipped between the static. One of them approached. MS. Johnson, he said, falsely casual. We need to ask you a few questions about your flight today. Go ahead. There's been a report, he said. Someone in your row mentioned you were using a device to record cabin staff without consent. Layla stared at him. That's not true. We're just conducting a follow-up, he said, motioning to a table behind him. Can we take a quick look through your bag? Layla paused. Do you have probable cause? We have a passenger complaint. We're authorized to conduct a visual inspection for safety. She didn't argue. She followed them to the inspection area, a high-visibility counter surrounded by plexiglass and recessed lighting. Travelers walked past in waves, some staring, some pretending not to. Layla placed her bag on the table. A female security officer joined the inspection and opened the tote. She rifled through the items slowly, purposefully, lifting her phone, her compact, her charging block. Then came the small black pouch where Layla kept her jewelry. The officer opened it and pulled out the platinum Patek Philippe watch Layla had been gifted after closing a sovereign debt restructure deal 3 years ago. The other officer leaned closer. Nice piece. That real? Layla didn't answer. Just asking, he said. We've had issues with counterfeit goods moving through this terminal. That's not a counterfeit, Layla replied. That watch is insured under its own policy and serial logged with my private bank. The woman nodded without confirming and placed it aside. Then she removed a small envelope labeled Horizon Asia Due Diligence Private. She opened it. That's confidential, Layla said sharply. You've entered a legal threshold by breaching that seal without probable cause. The officer didn't respond. She simply placed the file back, then zipped the bag halfway. Nothing suspicious, she mumbled. No device violation. Layla zipped the tote herself and stood silently. She adjusted her collar, rolled her shoulders back, and looked both officers in the eye. Do not confuse policy with permission. I complied for efficiency, not because you had a right. Neither responded. She walked away, back toward the private lounge corridor, but not to rest. She needed to locate her bag. She needed to ensure that the documents, especially those pertaining to the Zurich boardroom strategy and Orion's internal whistleblower review, were either secure or unrecoverable by anyone else. She stepped into a quieter alcove, dialed her assistant on a secure line, and spoke in a clipped tone. Check Cloud Sync. I need you to verify the last 5 documents uploaded before wheels down. If anything is missing from the merger folder, initiate emergency purge protocol. Understood, came the reply. Also, she added, log an asset loss report through the Sovereign Internal Network. Flag location, Haven Air Concourse, Terminal C. She hung up. The walls were closing, not physically, but procedurally. In less than 3 hours, Layla had been downgraded, surveilled, deprived of medical accommodations, erased from access records, had her belongings reassigned without authorization, and now faced baseless accusations of misconduct. Each incident, in isolation, might be dismissed as a fluke, but together, they formed a strategy, a campaign, not against her name, but against her identity. Layla Johnson, black woman, solo traveler, finance executive, not the archetype this system expected, much less respected. She wasn't being mismanaged. She was being diminished. Back at the counter near Gate C, she spotted a familiar face, Trent Maxwell, the regional passenger experience lead. He stood arms crossed, watching her from a distance, expression unreadable, but posture relaxed. Not surprised, not concerned, just observing. Layla looked at him directly. He didn't flinch. He didn't wave. He didn't blink. She turned before he could say anything and began walking toward the operations hallway that led to claims. A different clerk greeted her. MS. Johnson, he said. We had a bag rerouted from the upper level. No skin data. No tag. Just pushed through with a note that said, in transit error, manual input. Might be yours. He led her behind a partition to a cluttered back room with metal racks, dusty vents, and fluorescent flickering overhead. Near the far wall, beside a mop sink and a tipped-over cart, sat her bag. It was scuffed along the base. The outer pocket was unzipped. Layla dropped to one knee and opened it. Inside, no laptop, no folders, no watch box. Only her backup charger and a stained folder with water damage along the edges. Her jaw tightened. She stood up slowly, holding the bag by its handle. How long has it been here? She asked. No idea, the clerk said. Came in about 20 minutes ago. No one logged it. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She walked. Back in the main concourse, she sat on the nearest bench and opened her phone. One message blinked in secure text. 2 of 5 files not recovered. Purge incomplete. External access unlikely. Recommend escalation. Layla stared at the screen, then looked up, then looked beyond. Layla remained seated on the cold metal bench outside the baggage reprocessing area, her hand still gripping the handle of her half-empty, half-violated carry-on. The ache in her fingers was distant, almost abstract, compared to the roaring calculations unfolding behind her eyes. She had been rerouted, reclassified, publicly questioned, and now digitally erased. A woman in an Orion vest walked past and hesitated for half a second, as if to offer help, but her eyes flicked down to her handheld terminal. She scanned Layla's badge code on the boarding pass, still clutched in her coat pocket. Whatever appeared on the screen made her body language shift. She turned abruptly and walked away, pretending she hadn't seen anything. Layla's phone buzzed again. Another secure message from her assistant. We have a problem. Your Haven Air account access is down. Loyalty dashboard wiped. Lounge access blocked. Flag on profile 37C. Layla stared at the message for a beat longer than necessary. Not because she didn't understand it, but because she understood it too well. 37C. The internal designation code for passengers exhibiting combative, uncooperative, or suspicious behavior. It wasn't publicly acknowledged, but she had seen it before in audit logs, buried deep in a CRM database that her company, Nexus Horizon, had helped optimize for Orion's commercial arm 2 years ago. She was the architect behind the behavioral tagging algorithm that now labeled her as a threat. It was a cruel irony, like building a fortress only to have it lock you out. She opened her loyalty app again, though she already knew what she'd find. Instead of the familiar gold-tier dashboard, she was greeted with a blank screen and a message. Error. Profile does not exist or is restricted. Please contact guest services. She toggled to the lounge tab. Access revoked. Her flight history was gone. Points, 0. Status, none. There was no system glitch. No maintenance notice. This was deliberate. Across the terminal, she spotted a kiosk and approached it cautiously. She tapped her passport number into the touchscreen, then her flight confirmation code. It blinked red. A pop-up appeared. This passenger requires manual verification. Please contact the gate agent. Behind her, 2 other passengers used adjacent kiosks and received clean, green checkmarks. Boarding passes printed instantly. She turned slowly and walked away. There was a time not long ago when Layla would have escalated, demanded to speak to an operations lead, pulled rank, cited policy. But not today. Today, she was watching. Every digital wall they built around her was a mirror, showing her just how much of their infrastructure she had touched, and how easily they thought they could weaponize it against her. She found an empty bench in a quieter corner of the terminal, far from the crowd, near a defunct water fountain, and a flickering display screen that still showed a delay from 2 days ago. She pulled out her tablet, one of the few pieces of tech that hadn't been compromised, and opened a secure file stored offline. It was a list of back-end API call logs from the Haven Air loyalty system. She'd retained admin credentials from the original development contract, a contingency most clients ignored after rollout. Layla didn't, not because she intended to use them, but because she never trusted entities that commodified loyalty and sold status while outsourcing ethics. She skimmed the logs, filtering for changes to her member ID. Timestamp, 9:17 a.m. A back-end directive had overridden her tier status, reduced her point balance to 0, deactivated lounge credentials, and tagged her profile as restricted behavior observed. The reason field? Empty. She cross-checked the admin signature. Not a frontline employee, not even a supervisor. This override came from an operations manager with Tier 4 permissions, someone with authority, someone covering their tracks under a vague behavioral pretext. Trent. It had his fingerprints, his access clearance, his timing. She locked the tablet and stared ahead, letting the emotional weight settle for a moment. They weren't just inconveniencing her anymore. They were isolating her, rewriting her identity in a system she'd helped build. The thought wasn't just infuriating, it was insulting. 2 years ago, when Orion was struggling to compete with newer international carriers, Layla's firm had been brought in to audit and redesign their entire customer experience ecosystem. She'd been the one to streamline the loyalty tiers, redefine behavioral metrics, and implement the priority matrix that now decided lounge access, boarding zones, and concierge services. The irony? She'd argued internally for more ethical safeguards, manual override logging, secondary verification on profile downgrades, bias detection in behavioral tagging. But leadership, desperate to cut costs and streamline volume, had pushed back. Too many checks, they said. We trust our people. Layla didn't. That's why she kept a kill switch in her back pocket. Today, it was still dormant, but the countdown had begun. She scrolled through her email. Several internal memos had come in, legal updates, contract approvals, nothing urgent. She opened one from a partner firm confirming that the Zurich boardroom was prepped, with all necessary compliance documentation loaded and ready for review. But none of that would matter if she didn't arrive. And the way things were going, the system would make sure she never did. Another alert buzzed, this time from a travel analytics tool she used privately, a program designed to track ticket volatility, gate activity, and back-end manifest reshuffles in real time. It pinged her profile and returned a warning. Passenger L. Johnson deprioritized inactive queue. Reclassified to standby overflow. Boarding not guaranteed. She exhaled sharply. Overflow. A purgatory class. No confirmed seat. No service priority. A gray zone designed to quietly nudge unwanted passengers into missed flights without ever officially denying them. A digital ghosting. She tapped her encrypted app again and began drafting a new command. Flag behavioral tag 37C on profile ID LJ4581200. Cross-check system notes. Return override logs. Identify escalation origin. She paused, then deleted the message. Not yet. Not until she saw how far they'd take it. Because what they didn't know, what they'd forgotten, was that the same system designed to invisibilize her could be inverted. The same algorithms that profiled her behavior could be used to profile theirs. A voice over the intercom snapped her attention back to the moment. Passenger Layla Johnson, please report to gate C12. She stood. Not quickly. Not slowly. She gathered her coat, her worn carry-on, and her half-charged phone, and made her way toward the gate. Whatever came next, she was done reacting. Now, she was logging every word, every move, every silence. Layla arrived at gate C12 with the deliberate grace of someone who refused to be rushed, her movements controlled, her expression unreadable. The agent behind the podium glanced up as she approached, hesitated a moment too long, then returned his attention to the screen in front of him. I was called, Layla said simply, not offering explanation, not requesting clarity. Yes, ma'am, he responded, but his tone was perfunctory. We were just confirming a head count for the overflow manifest. You're listed as standby for the next Zurich flight. That flight departs in 7 hours, she replied. My ticket is for the current departure. There's been a scheduling anomaly, he offered, vague and hollow. We're doing our best to reaccommodate everyone. Accommodate, Layla repeated. You're speaking to someone whose seat was downgraded, whose credentials were wiped, whose luggage was tampered with, and whose profile now reads like a liability notice. The agent blinked. I'll make a note, he said, as if she had filed a preference for extra legroom. Layla turned, walked to a row of chairs facing the window, and sat at the far end, where no one else was seated. She placed her tote to her left and rested her phone on her right thigh. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breath didn't falter. But inside, her systems were already running diagnostics of everything lost, everything hidden, and everything she still controlled. 5 minutes later, a young staffer with neatly parted hair and a nervous energy rolled a refreshment cart through the gate area. Passengers perked up at the sight of water bottles, box juices, and prepackaged snacks. Layla waited, watching his pattern. He stopped every 2 or 3 rows, offering items with a trained smile. When he reached the end, she lifted a hand slightly. Could I have a bottle of water? She asked, tone neutral. He glanced down at a clipboard, then back at her. Name, Layla Johnson. He checked the list. Sorry, ma'am. You're not marked as a priority recipient. This cart is for upgraded and preferred customers only. Water isn't an upgrade, she said. It's basic hospitality. I'm just following the manifest notes, he replied. We've had some issues with passengers earlier, so management wants us to be selective. She studied his face, searching for the discomfort of someone realizing what he'd just implied. But he didn't flinch. He moved on. The woman across from Layla, a middle-aged traveler with earbuds and an oversized fleece, watched the exchange, then leaned over to her husband and whispered something. He chuckled quietly, not looking up. Layla felt the burn of being marked, not by words, but by omission. She opened the Haven Air app again. The splash screen loaded slowly, hesitated, then displayed a profile message she had never seen before. Your membership tier could not be verified. Please contact guest services. She tapped the My Account tab. Blank. She refreshed. Blank. Her Sapphire Elite status, visible just an hour earlier, had vanished. No tier. No access. No history. The app might as well have been welcoming her as a new user. She logged into the web portal instead, switching to private mode, and attempted to verify her status through her corporate credentials. Denied. Error code 141, profile not found. She sat motionless, letting the weight of the erasure sink in. Not just exclusion, not just tagging. This was deletion. Systemic invisibility. The kind of digital disappearance reserved for individuals flagged as threats to operational continuity. 30 minutes passed. The gate lounge grew noisier, crowded with delayed passengers, families struggling with strollers, business travelers complaining about layovers. Layla remained silent. Then another staff member appeared, not in uniform, but in gray coveralls with a Haven Air patch on the chest. He carried a tool bag and looked around before locking eyes with her. "MS. Johnson?" he asked. "Yes. We've had a report of vibration in the seat row you're occupying. Just need to check for structural irregularities." She didn't move. "This seat?" "Yes, ma'am. Passenger behind you mentioned discomfort due to movement." Layla slowly stood. The seat didn't so much as creak beneath her. The floor was solid. The row was untouched. "May I ask," she said, voice lower now, "how many complaints are needed before maintenance is triggered?" "Just one," he replied, "especially if it's been tagged through priority escalation." "Priority?" she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Internal classification. I'm just here to inspect." He bent down and began unscrewing the side panel of her chair. Layla took 3 steps back, observing. There was no need for repair, no visible issue. The entire performance was a pretext, an excuse to displace her without formally removing her. Another alert pinged on her device. This time, it wasn't from Haven Air. It came from an independent service she subscribed to, an AI-powered flight tracking tool that monitored real-time system changes. The log showed a data cascade at 10:52 a.m. Layla's profile had been downgraded to unregistered guest. All privileges revoked. Lounge access, null. Food services, null. Travel insurance verification, pending failure due to unconfirmed ID. The final line on the log read, "Tag appended. Behavioral risk 37C. Subnote, soft flag noise suppression recommended." She stared at the phrase noise suppression, knowing exactly what it meant. The goal was no longer denial. It was deletion, not to confront her, but to ensure her silence by making her digitally untraceable. She wasn't a passenger anymore. She was background interference. She returned to the gate desk, determined to re-establish some trace of visibility. A different attendant was now on duty, a young woman with thick-rimmed glasses and the polished, cheerful tone of someone new to the job, but already practiced in soft redirections. "Hi," Layla said. "I need to verify whether my boarding status for the Zurich flight has been restored." "Name?" "Layla Johnson." The woman typed it in, then frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, but you're not listed as a confirmed passenger. You're currently on a floating standby with no assignment." "Why?" Layla asked. "Was my ticket refunded?" "No," she said, voice tight. "There's just no seat allocation. Your profile is missing required travel credentials." "Which credentials?" "It doesn't say. You'll have to call our help center. Or try rebooking through the main kiosk." Layla didn't respond. She simply stepped aside and approached the kiosk she had used earlier. Same error. Passenger profile not recognized. A few feet away, she saw a man, early 40s, white, wearing jeans and a sport coat, step up to the same counter. She heard him say his flight had been rebooked twice. The same attendant apologized profusely, scanned his ID, and within seconds, printed his new boarding pass. First class. No questions asked. Layla returned to the bench and sat, this time crossing her legs deliberately. She took out her tablet and opened a blank note. Title: Operational Incident File, Haven Air Suppression Protocol. She began typing, logging timestamps, incident codes, staff interactions, system anomalies. She included photos of the maintenance worker, copies of the app error messages, a screen capture of her loyalty tier before deletion, and security flag references from the back-end ping report. It was all admissible, all traceable, and all damning. The man beside her coughed once, looked over, and asked casually, "Rough morning?" "Depends who you ask," Layla replied. He nodded, then leaned closer. "Saw the water thing. Pretty messed up. I mean, it's just water." "It's never just water," she said. "It's access." He blinked, unsure how to respond, then looked away. Across the terminal, Trent reappeared. He walked slowly, confidently, speaking to a colleague, laughing at something on a tablet. He didn't see her watching. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, his behavior betrayed no concern. He thought the system had worked, that she was buried, that her name, stripped of its tier, stripped of its power, now meant nothing. But what he didn't know, what none of them realized, was that in trying to erase her, they had activated her. The hum of the terminal seemed to recede into silence as Layla sat motionless on the bench, her eyes fixed not on any screen or individual, but on the stillness inside herself. Her mind, however, moved with frightening precision, cross-referencing flight times, legal boundaries, digital thresholds, and breach clauses embedded in contracts she had personally negotiated. The systemic deletion of her identity, the coordinated effort to render her invisible, had one fatal flaw. They had assumed she had no power outside the terminal. But the power she wielded didn't rely on gates or seats or points. It lived in markets, in oversight boards, in contractual red lines that, when crossed, didn't just retaliate, they detonated. Layla reached into the inner pocket of her coat and pulled out her secure satellite phone. It was matte black, fingerprint locked, and connected to an encrypted relay housed in a private data farm in the Swiss Alps. She hadn't used this line in over a year. It was only for one thing: strategic disengagement. She tapped once, then again, then pressed and held for 3 seconds. The screen lit up. A single contact appeared: Operations Apex Desk. She tapped dial. The line connected in under 2 rings. A calm, male voice answered. "Confirm command." Layla didn't waste a word. "Initiate full extraction. Nova Capital to disengage all Orion holdings immediately. Equity, bonds, liquidity partnerships. Cascade, pull, effective now." The voice on the other end replied without pause. "Confirmed. Divestment protocol initiated. Total exposure, 480 million U.S. dollars. Timing window, 10 minutes, Layla said. Stagger across 3 exchanges. Don't let them mask it. Understood, the voice replied. Shall we initiate cascade notification to joint partners? No, she said. Not yet. I want silence until volume displacement is noticed on their end. Copy that, the voice confirmed. Relay activation in motion. Final confirmation pending Zurich and Doha. You'll receive back-channel log updates. She ended the call. The screen dimmed. The silence returned. She didn't exhale. Instead, she opened her tablet, connected through a secure private node, and began typing an email. The subject line was clinical. Immediate oversight notice Title VI violation, review requested. The recipients were specific. The U.S. Department of Transportation Civil Rights Division, the Office of Aviation Compliance, and 2 key individuals inside Orion Airlines executive tier, Leonard Westbrook, Vice President of International Operations, and Bryce Hammond, Chief Executive Officer. She had their personal emails. She had vetted them herself when Nova Capital decided to take a controlling interest in Orion's Asia-Pacific route expansion. She had sat across from them in boardrooms, smiled politely through their hollow pledges of diversity and equity. Today, she would remind them of those promises. Her email was short, sharp, and fatal. Gentlemen, I am submitting for your immediate review a portfolio of 9 internal reports collected between February and August of this calendar year. These documents include time-stamped transcripts, internal chat logs, whistleblower statements, and customer service escalation records that demonstrate a pattern of systemic racial profiling and discriminatory treatment of Black passengers within Haven Air terminals, specifically under Orion operational oversight. This message serves as formal notice of breach under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, with supplemental violations of FAA transparency guidelines and carrier accountability clauses. I have been silent long enough. All attachments are legally validated. Delivery receipts will be timestamped by external regulatory observers. Consider this your opportunity to respond before the response comes for you. LJ. She attached the folder. 9 files, encrypted, each bearing a verification hash created through a Swiss compliance audit firm. Once opened, the recipients would find not just Layla's personal ordeal, but the voices of 24 other passengers, some silenced through settlements, others ignored entirely. All had one thing in common. They had encountered the same algorithms, the same passive-aggressive glances, the same invisible rules. But none of them had owned a controlling interest in the airline. Layla hit send. The email disappeared from her screen. She closed the tablet, placed it carefully back into her tote, and stood. Across the concourse, an overhead monitor flickered, then flashed a subtle amber warning. Operational hold flight 882 to Zurich gate update pending. Most passengers didn't notice. A few groaned. A man stood and approached the counter. But the gate agents weren't talking. They were receiving updates from their terminals, updates that didn't come with public scripts. Inside Orion's real-time trading room, an alert began to sound. Sell orders across multiple international exchanges were spiking. A cluster of equity trades flagged unusual volume outflows tied to Nova Capital. Portfolio managers scrambled to triangulate the origin. Someone ran into the compliance officer's office with a printout. The headline, $480 million withdrawn from Orion strategic positions. Index exposure at risk. Ratings review probable. Inside the terminal, Layla returned to the same bench she had been pushed out of hours ago. No one challenged her now. A few passengers recognized her face from the water incident earlier. One whispered. Another stared. But no one approached. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Apex Operations. Phase 1 complete. Withdrawal across NYSE, Zurich, and Singapore logged. Estimated exposure ripple. 6% within 45 minutes. Early indicators show Tier 3 partners responding. Orion's bond rating will trigger a reassessment cascade in 24 hours unless counterweight. We await confirmation on whether to proceed to Phase 2. Legal freeze notification to federal contracts. Layla read the text and locked the screen. She didn't need Phase 2. Not yet. She needed them to sweat. She looked toward the private conference hallway Orion, sometimes used for premium client briefings. A manager in a navy blazer stepped out with a phone to his ear, voice urgent. She could read the body language from across the floor. Something was off. He scanned the terminal, then retreated inside. Meanwhile, back at Orion headquarters, Leonard Westbrook had just opened her email and stopped breathing for 5 full seconds. He reached for his landline, not his mobile. He didn't call legal. He called Bryce. The fallout didn't begin with a bang, nor with a press release. It began with a whisper, an anonymous message delivered to a mid-level journalist at a tech-forward news outlet in New York known for cracking open, quiet corporate collapses. The message came with attachments, 2 audio files, 1 video clip, and an internal memo with time-stamped Slack transcripts between customer service reps at Haven Air's Terminal C. The first file opened with a familiar voice, one that Layla herself had heard earlier that morning. Flat, male, processed through a headset, saying, "Passenger Johnson is a PR risk. Profile tag, difficult, solo, no entourage, unpredictable. She's, one of the ones we watch." There was a pause, then laughter. A second voice added, "Code her 37C. It'll keep her out of the front cabin. No need for noise." The transcript attached to the file included an exact timestamp, 8:14 a.m., just minutes before Layla was informed her seat had been reassigned. The second leak was worse. A video, captured by a phone tucked partially beneath a counter, revealed a back-office hallway inside the terminal. In the frame stood Trent Maxwell, Haven Air's regional guest experience supervisor, speaking quietly but clearly to a junior agent. "You see Johnson," he said, gesturing to the check-in feed on a wall monitor. "Make sure she doesn't board first. Use discretion. Don't provoke. Keep it quiet. Say it's a system error or something. Just move her down and document it later." The video ended as the employee nodded. The clip lasted only 22 seconds. But it was enough. By the time it hit internal newsrooms, it had already been verified by 2 independent forensic analysts, both confirming the voices and the source. Within 45 minutes, it was circulating on X, then LinkedIn, then business forums where corporate misconduct wasn't a scandal. It was blood in the water. Reporters began calling Orion's investor relations line. Layla didn't know who leaked the footage, and she didn't need to. She only needed the truth to move faster than the spin. Orion's executive floor went into lockdown by noon. Emails labeled urgent pinged across regional managers' inboxes with subject lines like crisis response hold and pending legal containment. But it was already too late. The market had begun to react. Analysts on morning finance panels began asking pointed questions about the Nova Capital withdrawal, why it had happened, what it meant, and whether the firm knew something others didn't. Within 2 hours of Layla's call, Orion's Class A shares fell 16%, wiping out nearly $1.2 billion in valuation. Hedge funds holding leveraged positions on airline stocks began hedging out of Orion futures. A viral thread posted by a former employee alleging years of quiet discrimination inside Haven Air operations reached over 90,000 reposts by late afternoon. Layla sat calmly in the concourse as the storm she had engineered began to swallow the sky. She didn't pace. She didn't refresh her news feed. Her phone buzzed only once, with a message from her legal counsel. "You're trending. Do you want to make a statement?" She typed one word. No, the silence was intentional. Legal battles were for people seeking resolution. Layla wasn't. She had already closed the file. This wasn't about winning in court. It was about creating a market correction, the kind no brand strategy could undo. Inside the executive briefing room, Trent sat pale-faced at a long glass table as the video played on loop. The legal director didn't speak until it ended. Then, quietly, "How long have you been issuing manual demotions without oversight?" "It's not like that," Trent said. "It's just internal discretion." "You gave a directive to profile and suppress a primary stakeholder," she replied. "You flagged someone with capital leverage as a threat, and you documented it on camera." "I didn't know who she was," he argued, voice cracking. "That's the point," the compliance officer cut in. "You didn't care." At the same moment, on the other side of the airport, a CNBC camera crew set up inside the terminal's public atrium. They weren't there for Layla. They were there for context, for B-roll. But as they filmed travelers passing beneath the Orion banner, a single alert beeped on the producer's phone. It was a push from Orion's investor app, issued in emergency mode. Temporary suspension of forward guidance due to liquidity adjustments. A formal statement from leadership is forthcoming. On air, a financial correspondent tried to make sense of the sudden drop. "We've seen sell-offs before," she said, "but this feels orchestrated. One fund pulling nearly $500 million, tied to internal discrimination claims? That's more than scandal. That's a governance failure." Layla opened her tablet, not to check headlines, but to review the notification logs from her Cascade system. Every partner she'd set to observe and delay had done just that. The investment freeze on Orion's joint venture with Haven Tech Asia had been flagged for revision. A pending $90 million infrastructure package for a low-emissions jet fleet, originally backed by Nova Capital, now sat in limbo. Another note from Zurich. Doha delegation requesting formal explanation before proceeding. Boardroom reconvening without Orion. Layla smiled. Not out of malice, but out of clarity. Systems didn't collapse because of one person. They collapsed because they were built brittle, and no one thought the people at the margins had the tools to shake the foundation. But Layla had been building the tools for years. All they did today was hand her the hammer. Back at the terminal, the gate agents now avoided eye contact with her. The junior attendant who had once refused her water quietly wheeled his cart away, not speaking to anyone. A senior customer liaison approached and stopped 2 meters from her seat, eyes scanning the floor, then walked away without a word. Power had shifted, not because Layla announced it, but because the system felt it, and in its fear, began folding in on itself. Bryce Hammond, the CEO, held his phone so tightly his knuckles were bone white. She sent the reports directly to DIT. There's no buffer. They've already opened a Title VI evaluation. She didn't threaten us, she notified us. Can we preempt? His deputy asked. We don't even have time to draft a response, Bryce muttered. She didn't go public. That's worse. She gave the system a chance to speak before she does. And we failed to control it. Layla's phone buzzed one final time. A message from a confidential source embedded in one of the national press outlets. Full Orion internal thread dump just hit our inbox. Includes Slack, SMS, and audio. You didn't send it. She typed back, no. And I won't. But someone should. The journalist replied with only 3 words. It already leaked. The conference room was sterile, devoid of the usual trappings of corporate presentations. No banners adorned the walls. No branded backdrops stood behind the podium. The lighting was functional, casting a stark glow over the assembled executives. A single microphone stood at the center, its presence both inviting and accusatory. Bryce Hammond, CEO of Orion Airlines, approached it with measured steps, his expression a blend of contrition and resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady but subdued, we are here today not to defend, but to acknowledge. Our actions, or lack thereof, have led to a breach of trust that we must now address. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room. We failed to uphold the standards we professed. We allowed systemic issues to persist, and in doing so, we alienated not only our customers, but our partners. The room remained silent, the absence of applause or murmurs underscoring the gravity of the moment. Bryce continued, effective immediately. Trent Maxwell has resigned from his position. We have also agreed upon a compensation package to address the reputational damage incurred, amounting to $3.2 million. He looked directly into the camera, his gaze unwavering. To Ms. Layla Johnson, and to all those affected by our shortcomings, we extend our sincerest apologies. We recognize the depth of our errors and are committed to making amends. As he stepped away from the microphone, the room remained hushed. There were no questions, no follow-ups, just a collective acknowledgement of the statement made. Outside the building, news outlets had already begun disseminating the announcement. Headlines flashed across screens. Orion CEO issues public apology amid scandal. Executive resigns following discrimination allegations. Company pledges reforms after investor withdrawal. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, ranging from skepticism to cautious optimism. Some users shared their own experiences, while others called for further accountability. The conversation had shifted from outrage to reflection, a testament to the impact of the acknowledgement. In a quiet office miles away, Layla watched the broadcast unfold. She noted the absence of fanfare, the deliberate simplicity of the setting. It was not a spectacle, but a statement, a recognition of fault and a promise of change. She closed her laptop, the screen fading to black. The battle had been fought not with lawsuits or protests, but with truth and transparency. And in that truth, there was power. The final blow came not with headlines or breaking news banners, but with a formal letter delivered by courier to Orion Airlines Executive Compliance Office, a thick white envelope embossed with the federal seal and marked urgent. Contract termination. The content was clinical but final. The Department of Defense, in cooperation with the Department of Transportation and Foreign Service Logistics, was officially suspending its ongoing 5-year transportation contract with Orion Airlines. Total value lost, $1.8 billion USD. The rationale cited was a breach of non-discrimination clauses, unresolved civil rights violations, and failure to report internal escalations regarding protected class profiling within its customer experience infrastructure. There would be no hearings, no second chances. Orion would no longer fly defense personnel, diplomatic envoys, or state-sanctioned cargo, effective immediately. Bryce Hammond, still reeling from the public apology issued weeks earlier, stood in his office gripping the letter as if it physically weighed him down. He didn't call legal. He didn't call the board. He simply sat, stared out the window overlooking the tarmac, and realized this wasn't just fallout. It was the finish line. What no one inside the boardroom knew, not the executives, not the interim directors scrambling to implement reform, not even the crisis PR firm brought in to salvage brand equity, was that while Orion bled from a dozen market wounds, another entity had begun buying. Quietly, strategically, piece by piece. On the open market, their stock had tumbled more than 24% in 2 quarters. Retail investors were fleeing. Hedge funds cut their losses. And in the background, a firm named Vireo Holdings began absorbing shares, limiting trades to no more than 2% volume in any single session to avoid triggering alert algorithms. The name meant nothing to most, just another corporate vessel managing mid-tier assets in aviation and logistics. But inside Vireo sat 3 partners. Only one ever signed the documents, and only one had a controlling vote: Layla. She never used her own name, never appeared on filings. Everything was routed through Nexus Capital's offshore structures, clean, legal, untraceable to the casual eye. The same discretion that had once protected her clients now protected her strategy. In just under 4 months, Vireo acquired a 28% voting share in Orion Airlines, enough to swing board decisions, approve or veto executive appointments, and initiate internal charter revisions. But Layla didn't attend the meetings. She didn't replace the CEO or appoint a new diversity chief. She didn't build a public image campaign or join the board's weekly call-ins. She did something else. She rewrote the system from within. She contacted a boutique creative agency, one that specialized in language architecture for global institutions. Through an anonymous directive, she commissioned a full rebranding package: new slogan, new onboarding language, rewritten internal scripts, and a cultural compliance roadmap that required no grandstanding, only action. The agency never knew who issued the brief. They only knew it was funded, detailed, and uncompromising. The brief included one clear rule: the slogan must not sell forgiveness. It must sell clarity. The tagline they proposed, "We don't discriminate, we serve," was simple, disarming, and tested well in both legacy and Gen Z segments. Layla approved it in less than 90 seconds. No edits. 6 months after the scandal broke, Orion Airlines relaunched its primary routes with new uniforms, revised staff training protocols, and a sweeping media campaign focused not on apology, but on function. Ads didn't feature sob stories. They featured efficiency, trust, reinstated professionalism. There was no direct reference to Layla, to the scandal, or to the events that had nearly dismantled the airline's operations. But behind every line of copy, behind every revised process, behind every internal audit metric now tracking for equity deviations in real time, her fingerprints remained. One day, while walking through JFK's Terminal 4 en route to a private departure gate for a Nexus overseas session, Layla passed an Orion Airlines banner hanging above Gate 29. The updated slogan was printed in large, clean font against a sky blue backdrop: "We don't discriminate, we serve." A young woman in uniform handed out water bottles to waiting passengers, smiling without performance. A customer in the priority lane was black. The gate agent assisting him was Asian. No one hesitated. No one redirected. No one glanced over their shoulder. It was subtle, but it was working. Layla stopped for a moment, just long enough to let the image lock into her memory. Then she turned, coat brushing lightly behind her, and disappeared down the private corridor. She never gave interviews, never wrote a memoir, never posted a thread explaining how it all came together. When questioned by partners about the sudden Vireo purchase spike, she simply responded, "We saw opportunity where others saw weakness." That was enough. To her, justice was never about punishment. It was about re-engineering the machine, rewiring the gatekeepers, giving the next passenger in line a chance to be seen, not scanned. She had once been removed from a list, stripped of a seat, labeled a problem. Now she owned the list. And no one, not the staff, not the press, not even the executive team, ever realized that the woman who wrote the airline's new pledge had once been the woman denied water at Gate C12. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, or just the power of a comeback, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What part hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Layla got erased? Or when she rewrote the system from the inside? And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We want to know. Your voice matters. Your seat at the table matters. Let's keep the conversation going.